Hello my friends and welcome once again to this Red Gaming Tech video. Myself, Marta. Hope you guys have been well, been off for a couple of days, but I am back as always with the latest news from the tech world from the last 24 or so hours as of the 4th of July. Now, we have a Intel focused video for you today with a few other things thrown in at the end for a bit of spice, a bit of variety, but we're going to begin things with some benchmarks for Intel's 11th Gen Core Tiger Lake Xe GPU. So these were discovered by Tom Apisak and Rogame over on Twitter. Both of those names you should be very familiar with by this point. As always, you will find their tweets linked in the description below this video. So Tiger Lake is of course the first architecture to have the 10nm Willow Cove core design, and it is going to follow in the heels of Ice Lake for upcoming low power mobile devices. Now as for the benchmark itself, the first comparison, because there were a few benchmarks discovered, was versus the Nvidia MX350 graphics card, which is a Pascal solution for ultra thin laptops. So, let's have a look at the first benchmark, shall we? On the left you can see the i7 1165G7, which has 96 execution units, and once again is on Xe graphics versus the Nvidia GeForce MX350. So, as you can plainly see, there is a couple of scenarios where Nvidia's GPU was in the lead, primarily histogram equalization and particle physics, but for the rest, it was in the hands of the Intel part. But we also have a comparison, interestingly enough, of an i5 Tiger Lake compared to the i7 processor. So the i5 part has only 80 execution units, whereas the i7 has 96. So the i5 is expected to be roughly 13% slower than the i7 part. In terms of the results, they are pretty much what you would expect. The part with more execution units is doing better in all of the cases that we see here. And of course it goes beyond just execution units, and thankfully the specifications for both parts was also shared. For the i5 1135G7 we see 2.42 GHz, 4 cores, 8 threads. For the i7 part it's 2.8 GHz, but still the same 4 cores, 8 threads that we saw on the previous one. And once again, the difference in EUs. As I said though at the start of this video, there is a little bit of a focus on Intel today because that's not the only interesting thing that was spotted from the company. We have seen a 1085K processor being spotted. Sorry, 10850K, I suppose you should say. So essentially what we have learned from what Tom Apisak has found is that Intel are apparently planning to launch yet another i9 desktop part for the LGA 1200 socket in the Comet Lake S line. And it is the 10850K processor which I mentioned at the start of this segment, which has 10 cores and 20 threads. Now you might be wondering, okay, what is the difference between this part and the 10900K model? The leak does show that it has a slightly lower boost clock, only 100 MHz difference going up to 5.2 versus the 5.3 GHz thermal velocity boost of the full-fat 10900K. It would have the same cache configuration, however, which is 20 MB of L3, 2.5 MB of L2. In terms of the performance difference that we actually see, it was noted by the folks over at WCCF Tech, and of course you can find their article link below as well, that there is a fairly small difference between the two parts. The 10850K comes in at just 5% slower in the multi-threaded benchmark. Now of course this is just a single benchmark and we shouldn't take it as read that this is the case across 100% of cases. Obviously that's not going to happen. Different benchmarks, you know, they favour different parts, and we may see different results come in as more benchmarks come in, and especially gaming benchmarks as well. But I wouldn't expect a huge difference in the end, to be honest. I'm just saying we shouldn't take it as read, but given the very small difference between the two parts, it's going to be a minimal difference in performance between the 10850K and the 10900K. Now Intel have actually already done this with the 10th generation for the mobile Comet Lake H series parts, because we have a 10850H 10-core processor. So they're kind of reflecting in the desktop what they've already done in the mobile segment with this particular move, if of course this leak turns out to be accurate. For those of you wondering why Intel would be doing this, well, it obviously helps them compete against AMD, but it's probably primarily just due to them wanting to get as much as they can out of the yields for this particular series. Maybe they just had a series of chips that were just slightly slower, too slow to be called true in a 10900K, and rather than chucking them in the bin, they decided to add them to the lineup, perhaps at a slightly cheaper price point. I think the difference in price point between this and the 10900K is obviously going to be very critical, because if there's not much of one, well, if it was me, and let's say it's £50 difference, just for example, if it was me, I would just spend the extra 50 and get the 10900K, but that's just me. Not everyone might feel that the same way. We are done with Intel for today, at least. We're going to move on next to Nvidia and a very interesting rumour regarding Ampere. So, cast your mind back. You may recall there was rumours some time ago that Nvidia was planning to do a staggered launch with some high performance parts, like say the RTX 3090 or 3080 Ti or whatever it ends up being called, was going to use the TSMC 7nm process, and the lower end parts were going to go with Samsung. But a very interesting rumour has raised its head today thanks to Kapiti7Kimi on Twitter. Hopefully I pronounced that even close to correctly. Of course, they will be linked below as always. Now, do keep in mind that while this is a rumour, none of this is confirmed. This particular leaker has a very solid history when it comes to RTX 3000 series leaks, and they actually had the die configurations down months before anyone else. So don't write this off completely just because it's a rumour, but do just keep in mind that this could all be incorrect or outdated, or it could be right as well, I'm just saying. Anyway, all that red tape out of the way, what did they actually say? Well, essentially, they stated that Nvidia are actually going to use Samsung's 8nm process for the entire Ampere line, meaning that they would not be using TSMC, they are going to use Samsung's 8nm. Now do keep in mind as well that Nvidia themselves have previously stated that they will be using the 7nm TSMC process. And Nvidia has already used the 7nm process for the higher end Ampere lineup, so what this is probably referring to is the gaming cards, the RTX cards. But the point is that they are saying that they're going to be using the 8nm process. Now the question here is, would they do it? Do I think they're going to do it? Well, it would actually make sense in some ways. Samsung and their 8nm process is going to be cheaper than TSMC's offering, and probably has more spare production capacity. Now TSMC have not made a secret over the fact that they have been very, very busy bees over there, and obviously have been producing lots of chips for, Apple, AMD, all sorts of companies, and their capacity is obviously busy, let's just say. So Samsung obviously has more spare production capacity. Now TSMC's 7nm EU process is more energy efficient, but if this rumour is true, it seems that Nvidia aren't too bothered about that. They are more interested in the fact that, obviously as said, it's cheaper, and again they'll be able to meet Nvidia's demand. Now a little bit about the 8nm process itself. It is based on a 10nm backbone and is actually going to be 10% more energy efficient than 10nm itself, and it will still be a pretty significant jump in performance than what Nvidia have currently going on with the RTX 2000 series. So while it's maybe slightly less energy efficient than TSMC and wouldn't be as big of a jump in that area versus Samsung, it's still going to be a significant jump, is basically what I'm saying. Now obviously, again, just a rumour, we don't know if this is true, but it's a very, very interesting rumour indeed. Now obviously, ultimately to gamers, they don't really care what process a graphics card is based on. They just want improvements, more performance, better specs, and obviously improvements in stuff like ray tracing and DLSS. But it would still be a very interesting move from Nvidia to actually do this, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Probably till August, that's when we saw the RTX series revealed at the Gamescom conference. Most likely that will be a digital event this year, like everything else, but I would expect we'll hear some news roughly around then. Next up, we're going to discuss some comments from the Epic CTO regarding the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Now, this was when he was speaking with the latest issue of the official PlayStation Magazine UK, and this was Epic's Kim Libery. And basically he said that the new upcoming console are going to fulfill his, quote, lifelong dream to deliver movie quality visuals. But let's see what he actually had to say for himself. He said, quote, "It has been a lifelong dream of mine that real-time computer graphics, and in particular games, can be believable and realistic as a movie. Next-gen graphics and processing power will not only make games more immersive, but will also enable entirely new gameplay concepts that can take advantage of fully dynamic environments and lighting, much improved physics, smarter AI, and richer multiplayer experiences." Now, it becomes pretty clear when you read through this interview, obviously this is a quote, that he's speaking about more than just video games here, and he went on to go into specifics about Epic's collab with Lucasfilm for the creation of the show The Mandalorian. Really good, by the way. If you haven't seen it, would highly recommend. Anyway, he said, quote, "For many years, the movie industry has been experimenting with Unreal Engine for visualization, and cinematic shot design. And then last year, Jon Favreau and Lucasfilm made the leap to use Unreal to generate final pixels for in-camera visual effects on The Mandalorian. Yet there is still the challenge that the movie industry creates almost infinitely complex assets, and for real-time content, we need simplified polygon meshes and normal maps. With Nanite, a new breakthrough technology in Unreal Engine 5, we have removed the barriers. You can now create environments with full quality cinematic assets, and the engine does all the heavy lifting, resulting in some truly photorealistic results." So what he's saying here, again, it does apply to more than just video games, and if Unreal Engine 5 can obviously deliver those better quality results and a more efficient workflow and obviously faster, etc., then we might see this sort of tech being used more and more in shows like this, and of course in full big budget blockbusters as well. But even on the gaming side, even for smaller developers, it's going to be a huge help, because if the engine is doing all this heavy lifting, you don't need a person to do that. That person can instead be focusing their efforts somewhere else. Obviously, this is the case for any engine that's well created, but the tech that we saw demonstrated for Unreal Engine 5 has the potential to be really, really interesting, and I look forward to seeing what developers use it to create. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to see the preview until early 2021, and the full release is planned for late 2021, should I say. But still, we are still going to see some interesting games come out of this, I am sure, even if it's a few years into the future. Anyway, I'm going to move on to something very, very quickly just to round off the video, because this is something I personally think is pretty cool, and it's regarding the PC version of Horizon Zero Dawn. So basically what happened is there was a reveal of the PC system requirements and release date for the PC version. Now, I have already played Horizon Zero Dawn on the PS4, but having watched the little trailer they did for the PC features, I am very, very happy to see that it looks awesome. Can't wait to play it again on PC, personally. So, if you're like me, looking to play the game either for the first or second time, this is what you'll need. So, the minimum requirements: Windows 10, obviously, Intel i5-2500K at 3.3 GHz or AMD FX 6300 at 3.5, 8 gigs of RAM, at least an Nvidia GTX 780 with 3 GB or AMD R9 290 with 4 GB, and brace yourselves, guys, 100 gigs of available space. Yikes, dude. Anyway, let's move on to the recommended. Obviously, OS is the same. For the processor, though, we see an i7 4770K at 3.5 GHz or a Ryzen 5 1500X at 3.5, 16 gigs of RAM this time, and Nvidia GTX 1060 with 6 GB or an AMD RX 580 with 8 GB, and once again DX12 and 100 gigs of space. As for the release date, it is going to be coming out on August the 7th and is going to be pretty eye-watering in terms of price, $49.99 and €49.99, but not exactly surprising that it's going to be expensive. Quick rundown of the features. I will link the trailer below so you can see it in all its glory, but it's going to support up to 4K, it's going to have ultra-wide support, it's going to have obviously graphics, tweaking, and obviously loads of presets and stuff like that you normally expect in a well-made PC version. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I am back for today and tomorrow, then I'm going to be off once again Monday, Tuesday, just for a bit of a camping trip. So hopefully the weather stays nice for me. Anyway guys, hope you're having a good weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.